Hello everyone, this is Kevin Annie Strong Voice. It's January 20th, 2021, and I thought on this inauguration day it would be good to inaugurate into our mad world a little bit of mental hygiene. So I've written this little reflection called Breaking the Chains That We Forge. What is this thing called? The Prison Planet. And of course we start with a quote from our good buddy Sun Tzu in The Art of War when he says, "Those who know neither themselves nor their enemy will lose every battle." Well, the unmitigated insanity of today's global COVID police state has made clear to many people that our society has all of the features of a prison, including the attitude of we the inmates. None of us think we're guilty. Instead, we see ourselves as unwitting victims of a malevolent and oppressive power for which we bear no responsibility. Injustice is always done to us, not with us or because of us. People born and raised in servitude think like that because they've never learned to be responsible for themselves or their own condition. They cannot see how they themselves continually build the brick and mortar of their own captivity. After all, as I recently said to a group of apparently awake people, don't we all still vote and pay our taxes and rely on the internet? So how can we pretend that we're fighting that which we rely on? Well, the truth is that ever since the late 18th century, all of us have been bred to think and live as inmates in the prison we call Western civilization. That time, in the late 1700s, is when the ruling class of a rising industrial urban society created the model in which to house its worker slaves where they would live and die. One of their hired philosophers was named Jeremy Bentham, and he came up with a model. It was called the Panopticon, the ultimate self-regulating prison. Well, Jeremy Bentham founded the British school of philosophy known as utilitarianism, which has really shaped the modern world. Utilitarianism says that nothing has any innate value or meaning unless it serves a practical and usable purpose. That includes human beings. If a worker cannot produce enough profit for an employer, he's fired, he's out, he has no meaning or purpose anymore. In other words, he has no worth in himself, but only as a means to somebody else's end, a practical outcome, like a cog in a machine. Just look around you in the world and you'll see that utilitarianism and the corporate culture it spawned rules everything and everyone, our minds and our systems of power. But the question remained, how do you keep the masses of people mentally chained to such an inhuman system as loyal industrial serfs? Well, Jeremy Bentham came up with the answer, and that answer was the Panopticon. The word means all-seeing eye, like the one on the American dollar bill. The Panopticon was the model not only for British prisons, but for all of society. Bentham first presented his ideas in a book he wrote in 1791 called Panopticon, or The Inspection House, applicable to any establishment in which persons are to be kept under inspection. Bentham's basic concept is that all the inmates of a prison, or society, are to be kept under observation by a single guard or authority, without the inmates being able to know whether they're being watched. Even if they're not being monitored continually, the inmates cannot know when they're being watched by the inspectors, and so they're compelled to regulate their own behavior lest they get into trouble. In effect, people become their own policeman and jail guard. One authority figure can thereby compel many people to keep themselves imprisoned and self-regulating. Sound familiar? The setup of the Panopticon prison was as a circular building, at the center of which was an inspection house that looked out in 360 degrees on all of the prison cells. From there, the inspectors would seem to continually watch the inmates, an impossible feat, but a convincing illusion to somebody trapped in their own individual cell. The system worked so well that Bentham insisted that his model be used in schools, hospitals, asylums, and every public facility. Well, he certainly got his wish. Just look around. Think of all of the CCTV cameras on every street corner today, or the requirement that we self-isolate from an alleged virus. Just look at those things and you can see how successful the Panopticon system has become. Well, from a managerial point of view, which is the only point of view of rulers, how to manage the crowd, from that managerial point of view, the brilliance of the Panopticon system is that the inmates of the system don't feel themselves to be imprisoned and regulated. They can observe the inspection house and feel on equal terms with the inspectors, even when it's the inmates who are the ones behind bars. Bentham, in fact, was a strong advocate for the universal right to vote and other progressive social reforms because, in his words, quote, "To remain manageable, the ones in captivity must believe they are the masters of their own lives." Well, today we live in a completely managed, corporatized society made so by none other than we the people ourselves. That dictates from a few unaccountable and invisible people to stand apart, muzzle ourselves, isolate in our homes, and be injected with unknown substances are made real and enforced by nobody but ourselves. The enemy isn't a few unelected bureaucrats and policemen. It's our own compulsion to comply and imprison ourselves because of the policing panopticon right in our own head. After all, are we not all continually concerned and watching for the all-seeing eye? Well, there is, of course, a flaw in his system and a way out of all this madness. Bentham himself spotted a problem in his panopticon model near the end of his life. He recognized that the system's success rested totally on maintaining in each inmate the sense that he was monitored by a central authority and isolated from everybody else. The inspection house at the heart of the panopticon had to dominate the lives and attention each day of all of the inmates. If that focus was lost and the prisoners became more mindful of themselves and of the others incarcerated around them, the all-seeing eye would lose its hold and its coercion over their thoughts, and they would have no need to regulate and police themselves. Instead, their thoughts would turn to escape and freedom. In Bentham's commentary on his book, he observed, quote, "I venture to add that the Russian model failed to achieve a durable success because of the free intercourse of the inmates with each other and the rather unimposing construction of the inspection house, to say nothing of the failure to impose corrective measures on the prison population. Confined in one of these cells, every motion of the limbs, every muscle of the face exposed to view, indulged with perfect liberty within the space allotted to him, each prisoner learns a natural compliance and in time contentment. Noise, the only offense by which a man thus engaged could render himself troublesome by making his presence known to the other prisoners, might, if found otherwise incorrigible, be subdued by gagging. A most natural and efficacious mode of prevention, as well as punishment. It must be remembered that silence is a necessary medium of the imprisoned." Silence. Well, I find Bentham's prescribed punishment of gagging especially relevant to our situation today, especially the masking requirement of our modern-day panopticon. Whether back then or now, a controlled population must be maintained as faceless, voiceless numbers, as things separated from one another and forever dominated by the fear of a central authority. If you restore people's natural voice, their identity, their connection to each other, their own authority will replace that of the artificially imposed panopticon. And then tyranny will crumble as the prison cells are opened from the inside out. Well, in our Common Law Republic movement today, we speak a lot about such liberation and self-governance and of how our local assemblies are replacing the present tyranny. But the minds and words of far too many of us are still fixated on the inspection house called the corporate state and its internet, and of what its all-seeing eye may do to us if we step out of line. Well, it's time to turn away from the inspectors and recover our own thoughts and voices in the company of all the other inmates. Of course, that's easier said than done. It takes a lot of work over many years. But the example must be set today and tomorrow by those few of us who've recovered ourselves, our lives and our minds. And we do so with the understanding of my old buddy Joe Hensby, the Vancouver longshoreman who was blacklisted for life because of his thoughts. Joe once said to me, "Free your mind and your ass will follow." May it be so. This is Kevin Annett, Eagle Strong Voice, republicofcanada.ca, murderbydecree.com. Carry it on. Thank you.